He was known by many names, but none of them were kind. The Widowmaker, the Demon of Dust Devil Creek, the Unbreakable. His official name, registered somewhere in a dusty ledger, was Ferdinand, but no one dared speak it. To name him was to grant him a humanity he did not seem to possess. He was a force of nature, a 2,000-pound storm of muscle and fury, wrapped in a hide the color of scorched earth. He had come to the bar and ranch with a reputation that preceded him like a thunderclap. He had shattered the leg of one rancher and the confidence of a dozen more. Fences were not barriers to him. They were suggestions he violently ignored. Steel gates were invitations to test his strength, and he always won. The air around his enclosure crackled with a palpable violence, a low hum of rage that seemed to seep into the very soil. Veterinarians spoke of him in hushed, frustrated tones. Animal behaviorists wrote him off as a lost cause, a neurological misfire, a bull whose aggression was so deeply wired it was inseparable from his existence. They used words like unrecoverable and hyper-aggressive. They advised the inevitable. Today was the inevitable. Today was the day the world was giving up on Ferdinand. The final call had been made, the paperwork signed with a heavy heart. A local sheriff, a man with a steady hand and a somber duty, was scheduled to arrive just after noon. Ferdinand's last meal lay untouched in his trough. He wasn't eating. He was waiting, pacing the perimeter of his reinforced pen, his massive head swinging low, plumes of hot breath fogging in the cool morning air. He was a monument to untamable power, a living legend of fear. But 500 yards away, in the quiet shade of a sprawling oak tree, a 5-year-old girl was about to challenge everything they thought they knew. She couldn't walk, she couldn't speak in a way the world easily understood, but she saw something in the monster that no one else could. And as the clock ticked down on his life, she was preparing to do the one thing every single person had forbidden. She was going to get closer. Her name was Lily. She was a universe of light and silence, contained in a small, fragile body. Born with a rare form of spinal muscular atrophy, her limbs were uncooperative, her muscles too weak to carry her. She navigated the world from the gentle hum of a custom-built wheelchair, her primary means of communication, a complex orchestra of expressive blue eyes, subtle gestures, and a small, programmable device that spoke in a soft, synthetic voice. To most, Lily was a tragedy wrapped in innocence. They saw the chair first, the perceived limitations, the silence. They spoke to her in loud, slow voices, assuming the stillness of her body meant the stillness of her mind. They were wrong. Her father, Robert, saw her as the center of his world, a precious, beautiful heart he had to shield from every possible harm. His love was a fortress, tall and strong, but sometimes for Lily, its walls felt suffocating. He had bought the small ranch not for the cattle, but for the quiet, for the open space he thought would be a sanctuary for his daughter. Then Ferdinand arrived, a private sale from a desperate rancher, and Robert's sanctuary suddenly housed a monster. He built the strongest pen he could, a cage within a cage, and forbade anyone, especially Lily, from going anywhere near it. But Lily was not afraid. From the safe distance of her porch, she watched Ferdinand. She used the binoculars her father had given her for birdwatching, not to see birds, but to see the bull. And where everyone else saw rage, she saw a terrible, lonely sadness. She saw the way his muscles tensed, not just in anger, but in fear. She watched him trace the same frantic path over and over, a prisoner not just of the steel fence, but of something deep inside him. He was a storm, yes, but she could see the eye of it, the quiet, terrified center that no one else bothered to look for. One afternoon, she painstakingly typed a message into her device. The robotic voice filled the quiet living room. "Daddy, the big cow is crying." Robert knelt beside her chair, his face a mixture of love and gentle correction. "He's not a cow, sweetheart. He's a bull. And he's not crying. He's angry, very angry. That's why we stay away." Lily shook her head, a small, determined movement. Her eyes were fixed on his. She typed again, her small fingers moving with purpose. "No, His heart is crying. It's too loud. Robert didn't understand. How could she possibly know? He saw a deadly animal, a threat to the one person he lived to protect. He saw liability and danger. She saw a soul in agony. And in that fundamental difference, a collision course was set. The quiet girl who saw silent tears, and the furious bull who roared with a pain no one could hear. The morning air was thick with a funereal stillness. The usual sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the cheerful chatter of farmhands were muted, replaced by a heavy, unspoken dread. Dr. Anya Sharma, the veterinarian, had arrived early. Her truck crunched on the gravel drive, and the sound seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet. She was a woman of science and pragmatism, but her face was etched with a sorrow she couldn't hide. In her bag was a syringe, a sterile, merciful end to a life that had become defined by its own uncontrollable violence. Robert met her on the porch, his shoulders slumped. "He's not even eaten," Robert said, his voice a low gravel. "Just pacing." Anya nodded, her gaze drifting towards the distant pen. "It's for the best, Robert. You know it is. We tried everything. The sedatives don't work. Behavior modification failed. He's a danger to himself and everyone else. This is the kindest thing we can do." Robert knew she was right. Every logical part of his brain agreed. He had seen the terror in the eyes of his most experienced ranch hands. He had seen the splintered wood and bent steel. But kindness felt like a hollow word. It felt like failure. It felt like an execution. Inside the house, Lily was watching. She saw Dr. Sharma's bag. She saw the grim look on her father's face. She couldn't hear their words, but she didn't need to. She could feel the finality in the air, a cold, sharp edge that cut through the morning warmth. She knew what they were planning for the crying bull. Her heart, a powerful engine in a frail body, began to beat with a steady, resolute rhythm. She had a plan. Her father had spent years teaching her about boundaries, about safety, about all the things she couldn't do. He had built a world of soft landings and gentle slopes. But he had also, in his effort to give her independence, provided her with a small, motorized wheelchair she could control with a highly sensitive joystick. It was meant to give her freedom within the safe confines of the house and the garden path. He never imagined it could be a key to unlock the most forbidden place on the entire ranch. While Robert and Anya spoke in hushed tones, their backs to the house, Lily went to work. Her small fingers, usually tasked with typing words of quiet observation, moved with a new urgency. She navigated her chair through the living room, around the furniture that was her daily obstacle course. She was silent. She was determined. The screen door, usually latched, had been left slightly ajar in the somber distraction of the morning. It was her opening. As Robert walked Dr. Sharma towards the barn to prepare, Lily guided her chair onto the porch, down the ramp, and onto the dusty path that led towards Ferdinand's pen, a path she had never been allowed to take. The hum of Lily's small electric motor was a whisper against the vast silence of the ranch. Her wheels left a thin, determined track in the rust-colored dirt. For a 5-year-old, the 100-yard journey was a formidable expedition, an odyssey into forbidden territory. Every rock was a mountain, every rut a canyon, but her focus was absolute. Her gaze was locked on the steel enclosure that held the source of the terrible, loud sadness. Robert turned from the barn, a final, grim nod to Anya, and his heart stopped. The porch was empty. Lily's favorite blanket lay pooled on the floor next to where her chair should have been. A primal wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over him. He scanned the yard, his mind refusing to process the impossible. Then he saw it. A small, slow-moving shape, halfway to the one place he had nightmares about. "Lily!" The name was torn from his throat, a raw cry of pure terror. He started running, his boots pounding the hard earth, his mind flashing with horrific images, the splintered wood, the raw power, the stories of men thrown like dolls. Anya, hearing his cry, spun around and saw it too, her clinical composure shattered, replaced by sheer, undiluted dread. She ran after him, her medical bag forgotten, but they were too far. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Lily's slow, steady progress felt impossibly fast, and their frantic sprint felt agonizingly slow. She reached the outer fence of the pen. There was a narrow gap near the gatepost, just wide enough for her small chair to slip through, a detail of faulty construction Robert had meant to fix but had never gotten around to. She guided her chair through the gap with a precision that was breathtaking. She was inside. She was in the kill zone. Ferdinand, who had been pacing his frantic, endless loop, stopped. The sudden appearance of this small, strange creature in his space broke his rhythm. He turned, his massive body a study in coiled tension, his head, a battering ram of bone and horn, lowered. A low, guttural sound, the prelude to a charge, rumbled in his chest. Robert was screaming her name now, his voice cracking with desperation. He hit the fence, his hands rattling the steel mesh, a helpless prisoner watching his entire world about to be extinguished. "Lily, no, get back, please!" But Lily didn't look back. She didn't seem to hear him. She stopped her chair about 20 feet from the bull. The world held its breath. The dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight. The only sounds were Robert's desperate pleas and the monstrous, ragged breathing of the bull. And then, Lily did something that defied all logic, all instinct for self-preservation. She lifted one small, delicate hand, and with her fingers, she typed a single word into her device. The synthetic voice, clear and calm, echoed in the tense silence. "Hello." The bull did not charge. The world did not end. Ferdinand, the demon, the widowmaker, froze. The sound, that small artificial word, seemed to short-circuit his rage. He blinked his huge, dark eyes fringed with thick lashes. Confusion warred with aggression on his massive face. He took one step forward, then another, cautious, hesitant. The ground vibrated with each hoof fall. Robert's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. He was ready to vault the fence, to throw his own body in front of his daughter. A futile, desperate act. But Anya grabbed his arm, her grip like iron. "Wait," she breathed, her eyes wide with a stunned, scientific disbelief. "Look." Lily showed no fear. Her face was a canvas of pure, serene empathy. She looked at the approaching mountain of muscle not as a threat, but as the object of her mission. As Ferdinand drew closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body and smell the wild, earthy scent of him, she reached out her hand again. She began to type, her small fingers moving over the keys of her device. It wasn't a single word this time. It was a sentence, then another. A stream of soft, robotic words filled the air. But Robert couldn't make them out. His own fear was a roaring in his ears. All he could see was the bull's enormous head, armed with lethal horns, lowering down, 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 until it was level with his daughter's tiny, fragile body. This was it. The final, horrific moment. But then the impossible happened. Ferdinand's head stopped inches from her. He let out a long, slow breath, a gust of warm air that gently stirred Lily's hair. And he listened. Lily, in turn, leaned forward as far as her body would allow. Her own lips moved, forming a silent word, a whisper too soft for anyone else to hear, a secret shared between the broken girl and the broken beast. And the bull, the uncontrollable force of fury, closed his eyes. His entire 2,000-pound frame seemed to deflate. The tension that had defined him, the rage that had been his only language, simply dissolved. He stood before her, utterly still, utterly calm. A profound, sacred silence descended upon the pen, broken only by the soft, rhythmic hum of Lily's wheelchair. He nuzzled his massive head gently, carefully, against the side of her chair, a gesture of such impossible tenderness that it shattered the reality of everyone watching. Disbelief. It was a physical thing, a thick, unbreathable fog that settled over Robert and Anya. They stood frozen, their hands still gripping the fence, their minds struggling to process the scene before them. The monster was gone. In his place was a gentle giant, nuzzling a little girl in a wheelchair as if he were a common house cat. The sheriff's car pulled up the drive, and he stepped out, a man prepared for a grim and dangerous task. He saw the group at the fence, saw the empty space where the raging bull should be, and then his eyes found the impossible tableau inside the pen. He simply stopped, his hand resting on the holstered sidearm he now clearly would not need. Robert was the first to move. His legs, shaky and weak, carried him through the gate. He didn't run. He walked slowly, cautiously, his parental terror now mixed with a bewildering sense of awe. Ferdinand lifted his head as Robert approached, his eyes no longer blazing with fury, but soft, dark, and intelligent. He looked at Robert, then back at Lily, and he did not move. He was guarding her. Robert knelt beside his daughter's chair, his hands hovering, unsure of what to do. He looked at Lily, whose face was glowing with a quiet, triumphant joy. Then he looked at the bull, this creature of nightmare, who was now resting his chin gently on the armrest of Lily's chair. Tears streamed down Robert's face, tears of relief, of confusion, of a love so deep it ached. "Lily, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice choked. Lily simply smiled and patted Ferdinand's enormous, leathery nose. Anya approached next, her medical mind racing, trying to find a logical explanation where none existed. Pheromones? A change in barometric pressure? A sudden, inexplicable neurological event? Every rational theory fell apart in the face of the quiet miracle before her. I don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "His pupils are dilated, but not with aggression. His respiration is slow and steady. It's like he's been sedated, but he's more present than I've ever seen him." The euthanasia was, of course, called off. The sheriff, after a long, silent moment of observation, simply tipped his hat, got back in his car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and stunned silence in his wake. The immediate crisis was over, but 1,000 questions had taken its place. Was this a fluke? A one-time event? Was the bull still dangerous? The world had been turned upside down in the space of 5 minutes. The monster had been calmed, but the mystery had just begun. And at the center of it all was a small, silent girl who held a secret in her quiet heart and in the whisper that had somehow, impossibly, saved a life. The days that followed were a gentle unfolding of a new reality. The bar and ranch, once a place of tension and fear, became a place of quiet wonder. Lily's visit to Ferdinand's pen was not a one-time event. It became a daily ritual. Every afternoon, under Robert's watchful, now awe-filled eyes, she would guide her chair into the enclosure. And every afternoon, Ferdinand would greet her with that same impossible gentleness. The transformation in the bull was profound. The frantic pacing stopped. The guttural roars of rage were replaced by low, contented rumbles. He would follow Lily's chair as she moved around the pen, his massive form a shadow of devoted protection. He would lie down in the dirt, tucking his legs beneath his enormous body, and rest his head near her feet, closing his eyes as she told him stories through her computerized voice. He ate from her hand, his huge, soft lips plucking apples and carrots with surgical precision. The physical fence still stood, a monument to a fear that no longer existed. It had been a barrier meant to contain a monster, to keep violence in and safety out. But now, it seemed like an artifact from another time. The real fence, the one built of fear and misunderstanding, had been dismantled by a 5-year-old's whisper. For Robert, watching this bond deepen was a daily lesson in humility. He had spent his life trying to build fences around his daughter, to protect her from a world he saw as harsh and unforgiving. He had defined her by her fragility, by what she couldn't do. Now, he saw a power in her he could barely comprehend. He saw that her silence was not an absence of voice, but an abundance of listening. He saw that her physical stillness allowed for a deep, profound emotional connection that the rest of the world, in its noisy rush, had missed. He started seeing his daughter not as someone to be protected, but as a protector herself. One afternoon, as he watched Lily and Ferdinand sharing a quiet moment under the vast blue sky, Anya came and stood beside him. She had been visiting daily, a scientist captivated by a phenomenon that defied her textbooks. "I've been reading," she said softly. Everything from interspecies communication to trauma bonding. There are theories, anecdotal evidence, but nothing like this. It's as if she speaks a language he was desperate to hear. Robert nodded, his eyes still on the pair. It's not a language of words, he said, a new understanding dawning in his own heart. He was in pain. Everyone saw it as anger. She was the only one who saw the pain, so she was the only one he would let get close enough to help. The fence no longer represented a barrier. It now represented a breakthrough. A line that had been crossed, not with force, but with an empathy so pure it could calm a savage heart. Word of the girl and the bull began to spread. It started as a whisper in the local feed store, a story told over coffee at the town diner, a rancher's tale easily dismissed as exaggeration. But the sheriff had seen it. Dr. Sharma had seen it. And soon a reporter from the local paper came calling. The story, when it ran, was tentative, framed as a local human interest piece, a heartwarming tale of an unusual friendship. But it came with a photograph, a picture Robert had reluctantly allowed, showing tiny Lily in her wheelchair, her hand resting on Ferdinand's colossal head. The image was so powerful, so filled with a quiet, undeniable truth, that it was impossible to ignore. The story was picked up by a regional news station, then a national one. The furious bull had a new name in the headlines: Lily's guardian. The world came knocking. Experts, journalists, spiritualists, and simple, curious people. They lined the road to the Bar N Ranch, hoping for a glimpse of the miracle. The quiet sanctuary Robert had built for his daughter was suddenly in the spotlight. The pressure was immense. Some called it a hoax, suggesting the bull had been secretly drugged. Others saw it as a sign from a higher power. Animal rights activists wanted to move Ferdinand to a sprawling sanctuary, while skeptical behaviorists demanded to run controlled experiments to quantify and explain the Lily effect. The noise was deafening. It threatened to shatter the fragile peace they had found. Robert became a gatekeeper, fiercely protective of the quiet bond his daughter had forged. He turned away cameras and experts. His priority, the serene world Lily and Ferdinand now shared. But the world's skepticism presented a new kind of test. Was this bond real, or was it a product of the calm, controlled environment of the pen? One late summer afternoon, the sky turned a bruised, ugly purple. A storm rolled in with unexpected ferocity. Wind howled through the ranch, tearing at the barn roof. Rain came down in blinding sheets. Robert was securing the house when a deafening crack of lightning struck a massive, ancient pine tree at the edge of Ferdinand's enclosure. The tree exploded in a shower of sparks, its dry wood instantly catching fire. A branch, burning like a giant torch, fell directly into the pen, landing on a pile of dry hay. Flames erupted, roaring and hungry, licking at the wooden posts of the fence. Panic seized the ranch. Ferdinand, trapped, began to bellow, not with rage this time, but with sheer terror. Robert and the ranch hands grabbed extinguishers, battling the wind and rain, but the fire was spreading too fast. In the chaos, no one noticed Lily. She had guided her chair out onto the drenched porch, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for her friend. She saw his terror, she felt his panic, and she did the only thing she could. She typed into her device, turning the volume to its maximum. A clear, calm, synthetic voice cut through the roar of the storm and the fire. "Ferdinand, I am here. Look at me. I am here." The bull's terrified bellows stopped. Through the smoke and driving rain, his wild eyes found the source of the voice. He saw the small, unmoving figure of Lily on the porch. He was trapped between a wall of fire and a steel fence, his primal instincts screaming at him to flee, but her voice, her presence, was an anchor in the storm of his fear. Robert, seeing what was happening, was torn. He needed to fight the fire, but his instinct was to get Lily back inside. Before he could move, Ferdinand did something extraordinary. He lowered his head and charged not at the fence, not in a blind panic, but directly at the burning section. He hit the flaming wooden posts with the full force of his 2,000 pounds. The wood splintered, groaned, and then gave way. He had created an escape route, but he didn't bolt for freedom. He turned, placing his own massive body between the fire and the direct line of sight to Lily's porch, a living shield against the heat and smoke. He stood his ground, his eyes locked on her, taking the brunt of the storm and the fire's fury, refusing to abandon his post. It was a sight that burned itself into the memory of every person there. He was not just an animal calmed by a girl. He was her conscious protector. He was actively, intelligently, and courageously defending her. The fire crew arrived moments later, dousing the flames and securing the area. As the smoke cleared and the rain softened to a drizzle, the scene left behind was one of stunning clarity. The broken, smoking fence, the exhausted but unharmed bull, standing steadfast, and the small girl on the porch, safe, because her friend had refused to leave her. Anya, who had arrived with the fire crew, walked slowly towards Ferdinand. He was singed, trembling, but calm. He allowed her to check him, his gaze never wavering from Lily. "He's okay," Anya announced, her voice thick with emotion. "He's in shock, but he's okay." All doubt was extinguished that day, washed away by the rain and the fire. The bond wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a quiet pen phenomenon. It was real, it was powerful, and it was reciprocal. Have you ever realized that the person you thought you were protecting was actually the one protecting you? In that moment, watching the colossal bull stand guard over his tiny, fragile girl, Robert finally understood. His daughter wasn't the one who needed a fortress. She was the fortress. In the quiet aftermath of the fire, a new understanding settled over Robert. He looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and saw not the chair or the silence, but the vast, powerful spirit within. The question that had haunted him for weeks, what had she whispered, no longer seemed like the most important mystery. The how mattered less than the what. What he had witnessed was a pure, undiluted act of connection that transcended species, science, and his own limited understanding of the world. He sat with Lily on the porch the next morning, the air clean and crisp after the storm. Ferdinand was in a temporary enclosure, calm and content, his scorched hide a testament to his bravery. Robert took Lily's small hand in his. "Tell me about Ferdinand," he said, not as a father questioning a child, but as one soul seeking wisdom from another. Lily looked at him, her blue eyes deep and knowing. She began to type on her device, and the story she told was not one of magic, but of empathy. The robotic voice explained. He was alone. Everyone was yelling. Inside his head, it was too loud. All the fear. From the other people. It made him loud too. Robert's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't just observing his behavior. She was describing his inner world, a world of sensory overload, of reflected fear. She continued. I told him to listen. Not to them, to listen to the quiet. I told him I wasn't scared. I told him my legs don't work, but my heart does. I told him his heart worked too. It was so simple, so profound. She hadn't used a magic word. She had held up a mirror. In a world that reflected only its fear and aggression back at the bull, making him more fearful and aggressive, she had reflected only peace. She had shown him an image of himself that was not a monster, and in doing so, allowed him to become something else. In that moment, Robert saw a mirror of his own. He realized that his own fear for Lily's safety, his desperate need to protect her, had been a kind of noise too. It had been his own loudness. He had been so focused on the cage of her disability that he had failed to see the key she held. He, like everyone else, had been looking at Ferdinand and seeing a reflection of his own fear. Lily had looked at Ferdinand and seen a reflection of her own quiet strength. The great, unbridgeable chasm between them was an illusion. The bull's rage and his own suffocating fear were just different expressions of the same thing, a response to pain and isolation. The healing for one was the healing for the other. Robert finally understood. His daughter's mission wasn't just to save a bull, it was to teach the rest of them how to see. The story of Lily and Ferdinand was no longer just a local curiosity. It became a modern parable. The Bar N Ranch, once a private, quiet place, transformed. Robert, with Anya's guidance, decided not to hide from the world, but to share the lesson his daughter had taught him. They didn't turn it into a tourist trap, but into a place of quiet healing. A non-profit was established, the Lily Ferdinand Project, dedicated to exploring and promoting restorative connections between traumatized animals and people, particularly children with unique ways of communicating. The broken fence was never fully repaired. Instead, it was reinforced and left with a wide, permanent gate, a symbol not of containment, but of open passage, of a barrier that had been lovingly dismantled. Ferdinand was no longer a prisoner. He was a resident, the heart of the ranch. He spent his days in a sprawling, open pasture, but he never strayed far from the house, always keeping a watchful eye on his best friend. Lily blossomed. The world that had once seen her as a silent, fragile object now saw her as a source of wisdom and strength. Visiting children, many with their own challenges, would come to the ranch. And Lily, through her actions and her quiet, powerful presence, would teach them. She showed them that true communication isn't about the volume of your voice, but the depth of your listening. She showed them that strength isn't just in the body, but in the capacity of the heart to see the pain in another and choose empathy over fear. Robert's transformation was perhaps the most profound. The fear that had driven him for so long was replaced by a deep, abiding faith, not in a higher power, but in his own daughter. He learned to listen to her silence, to trust her unique perception of the world. He was no longer just her protector, he was her proudest student. The final, iconic image of their story is not one of drama, but of profound peace. A warm evening, the sky painted in the gentle strokes of sunset. Lily, in her chair, is parked at the edge of the pasture. Ferdinand, the once furious bull, is lying peacefully in the grass, his massive head resting comfortably in her lap. Robert watches from the porch, no longer anxious, no longer afraid. There are tears in his eyes, but they are not tears of sorrow or relief. They are tears of pure, unadulterated joy. He is watching a conversation, one held in a language of touch and trust, a language of two souls who saw the best in each other when the world could only see the brokenness. The story of Lily and Ferdinand became a quiet roar, a reminder that the most powerful force in the universe is not anger or fear, but the courageous, transformative act of seeing another being, truly seeing them, and whispering, "I am here, and I am not afraid."